Hey, this is Gavin Gaddis in for Tom Webster for Sounds Profitable, Wednesday, January 21st, 2026. What would you do if you actually loved podcasting? The who and why of podcasting are important, but you have to get them in the correct order. While Tom is indisposed, I will be speaking on his behalf. Here is my pitch-perfect Tom Webster impression. Last week at PodFest, I asked a room full of podcasters a question that seemed, on the surface, to have nothing to do with podcasting. How many of you have hobbies? The hands went up around the room. Woodworking, painting, guitar, baking. Yeah, John Wardock. The usual suspects, the things we want to do when we aren't doing things we have to do. I asked them why we did these things, and the answers were predictable in the best way. Because it's satisfying, because they get better over time, because it's theirs. Then I asked how they were monetizing these hobbies, and the room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when people are suddenly confronted with an uncomfortable implication. People don't go into quilting conferences expecting a dozen sessions about monetizing your quilting. So why do you podcast? I didn't wait for an answer because it was, I admit, a kind of mean question to ask after the hobby question. I didn't wait for an answer because it was, I admit, a kind of mean question to ask after the hobby conversation. I've heard every possible answer to that question, but I wanted to sit with the dissonance for a moment, the gap between how we approach our hobbies and how we approach our shows. It's a gap worth exploring, because I think it explains more about why podcasts fail than any of the usual suspects we trot out at conferences. I've spent a lot of years studying why podcasts stop. The reasons why people give are varied on the surface. Didn't build enough audience, ran out of guests, ran out of ideas. These feel like different problems, discrete failures with discrete causes. They're not. They're all symptoms of the same underlying condition, and that condition has everything to do with which questions we ask first, and which we never get around to asking at all. But before I tell you what I think that question is, I want to tell you about my hobby, magic. Last year, on a trip to Torino for the FISM World Championships of Magic, I got to see a real idol of mine. His name is Mac King, the greatest comedy magician of all time, and he's performed the same afternoon show in Las Vegas for 30 years. 30 years of the same show, in the same room, to audiences who have presumably seen a magic trick or two in their lives. I went to see him lecture, and someone asked him how he keeps the show fresh after all that time. His answer was this: the show is fresh because I am fresh day after day, and I am fresh because the audience always changes, and I listen to them. Mac just doesn't perform at people, he brings them on stage. He listens, actually listens, the way an actor does, responding in the moment to what the room gives him. The show is alive because he's in a relationship with whoever happens to be sitting in those seats on any given afternoon. What struck me about this, and what I've been thinking about ever since, is that freshness isn't something you generate through sheer creative force. It's something you receive, if you're paying attention. This changed how I think about what makes a podcast last, and it led me to a framework I've been sharing with podcasters who will listen. The framework is simple, but the order matters enormously, and most podcasters get that order exactly backwards. Here's what most people do. They start with what? I need to make content, I need to make episodes, I need something to release. Then they figure out how. What are the tactics, the channels, the tech stack? Then eventually they think about the who. I suppose I should figure out who my audience is. And why is usually just to make money, or to sell something, or in the more honest moments, because I wanted to. That order is backwards, and it's why people burn out. Here's the right order: who, why, how, what. Who? You have to start here, and I don't mean with a demographic or an avatar or a target market. I mean to a specific human being. When I say to start with who, I mean a person. What's their life like? What are they worried about? What do they wish they had more of? Everyone who gives you their attention is a whole human with a life as rich and complicated as yours. This isn't market research in the traditional sense. This is basic human curiosity. about the people you're asking to spend their finite, precious time with you. Never forget that regardless of topic, a podcast has to be an entertainment, and you can't entertain humans if you aren't deeply attuned to them. Why? Here's where I need to tell you something that might be difficult to hear, and it contradicts a lot of the received wisdom in our industry. Your why doesn't matter. Your audience doesn't care about it, really. You can have the most compelling reason in the universe why you want to save the world with your podcast, but nobody cares. They care about what comes out of the speaker. They don't care that you want to explore interesting conversations. They don't care that you want a creative outlet. They don't care that you want to build a side hustle or establish thought leadership or any of the other reasons that feel so compelling when you're staring at a microphone. Your why is personal. It's yours. But it has nothing to do with why anyone would press play. There's a whole movement around Start With Why, popularized by Simon Sinek's TEDx talk and subsequently applied to everything from sneakers to software. I've written about this before. That concept was originally about leadership, not marketing. It suggested that leaders could inspire their teams more effectively if they could get them to buy into the company's overarching promise. But we aren't making a backpack here. We're crafting an entertainment. No one cares about the why behind Young Sheldon or NCIS or Law & Order or The Voice. They are all the same anyway. We would like to make a profit. The only why that matters is theirs. Why should they listen? That's the promise you're making to them. That why has to be rooted in an intimate knowledge of who they are and what they need. When you figure that out, you're not coming up with a purpose statement. You're discovering something that was already true about the people you want to serve. How? Only now can you figure out form, audio or video, 30 minutes or an hour, weekly or daily, solo or interviews. These answers come from knowing who you're serving and why they show up in the first place. If your audience is commuters with predictable drive times, an hour-long ramble might be exactly right. If they're parents stealing 15 minutes while the kids nap, you need to be tighter, more focused, more respectful of constraints you didn't choose. The format isn't about what's trending on the charts or what works for Joe Rogan. It's about what works for the specific humans you're trying to serve. What? And finally, the episodes themselves. Here's the thing I've observed over and over and over again in my years of doing audience research. If you've done work on who and why, the what almost generates itself. You're not sitting alone in a room trying to manufacture ideas out of thin air. You're responding to what you know about the people you're serving, and that knowledge is renewable because, as Mac King understood, the audience changes every day. This is how you never run out of ideas. You're not making them up, you're listening. And here's why this framework is actually good news for you, specifically, rather than for massive shows with budgets and staff. The biggest operations in media, TV, film, major podcast networks, they have research departments. They run focus groups. They analyze data at scale. They're trying to understand their audience through infrastructure and budget, and they're doing it at a distance through intermediaries, reports, and dashboards. You can't do that, and that's your advantage. What they're paying millions of dollars to approximate is something you can have for free, actual relationships. A TV showrunner can't DM their viewers and get a real answer. They get filtered through data, through layers of interpretation. They're trying to understand an abstraction, but you can reply to comments. You can build a Discord server and actually be in the room with your listeners. You can ask a question and get real answers from real people whose names you recognize. You can know the audience, not as a demographic, but as humans. That's not a consolation prize for being small, it's a structural advantage. The connection is direct, ongoing, and real if you build the channels for it and show up in them with genuine curiosity rather than marketing intent. But here's the key. You have to show up in those places like a craft person who wants to get better, not like a marketer trying to convert. If your show is ultimately a proxy for something you'd rather have, your audience becomes a proxy too. They can feel that, even if they can't articulate it. The relationship curdles. So let me bring this back to where we started, to that room full of podcasters and the question I wouldn't let them answer. Why do you podcast? The podcasters who are all still here in year 10 have something in common. It's not a monetization strategy. It's not that they found the right niche, cracked some algorithm, or got lucky with timing. It's that they asked themselves one question early on, and it wasn't, how do I make money from this? The question was, what would I do if I actually loved podcasting? If you actually loved this, you'd want to know your audience, not to extract value from them, but because curiosity about the people you're serving is part of loving the craft. If you actually loved this, you wouldn't run out of ideas because you'd be in constant conversation with people who share your obsession. If you actually loved this, you wouldn't burn out because the work itself would be the reward, not a means to some other end. So that's my question for you. Not how do you monetize, not how do you grow, just what would you do if you actually loved this? Whatever your answer is, go do that. Thanks for listening to Tom's article, What Would You Do If You Actually Loved Podcasting? For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis reading for Tom Webster, and we'll be back next Wednesday with another narrated article.